the mics are hot. They're rolling, pixels and panels, the story's unfolding. In a world of quests and heroes, they're holding the flag of nerd pride. They're the voices of the chosen.
Hello, and welcome back to episode 2 of Ginger Quest with me, Gaga Guy 88, and Captain Q right over here.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Oh yeah. So he's revealing this week his Super Saiyan microphone. It is golden, the golden microphone. So hopefully we're all able to hear him good. We heard him good before, but now we hear him super good.
There you
That's
go.
right.
Yep, Super Saiyan good. Yep. Golden mic for the golden voice. I understand, and I had to go with it.
Absolutely. So we had talked on our last episode about different game systems that we had growing up, and we got through all the way from the NES up to the N64 and all the systems we had in between. And unfortunately, we ran out of time, and we're like, hey, you know what? Let's just continue this on the next episode. So we thought we'd come back and do. Now we're going to try and cover Xbox, PS2, and GameCube and how that affected our lives, what we had personally, what we liked, what we disliked about them, as well as just maybe some general history and some games that we enjoyed, and maybe some those hidden treasures in there too that you never played before that you might try now. So with that, the first one we're going to start out with, I think, is going to be the Xbox. Would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, sounds good. We did a lot of time on that thing for sure. It was a workhorse, that Xbox.
Yeah, we did not give it any type of any relief whatsoever once we got this thing. It was all the time we were playing on the Xbox for sure.
So you want to tell the story of exactly how we came across this Xbox?
Absolutely. So this was another gift from our parents. Let me go ahead and get this thing up here. Bloop, there you go. Another gift from our parents. This one, again, another anniversary present. My parents always gave us gifts during their anniversary. That's just that's just whenever we got gifts. So we give them gifts, they give us gifts, and so this one, I remember getting it. I remember being in the living room, and our oldest brother, he did not. I don't believe he found out about this one like he did with the N64.
Nope, I don't think so.
So yeah, so he opened it up and it was one of those, you rip the gift wrap off as fast as you can. And as soon as he saw it, he was like, "What?" And we all started freaking out because, Xbox is something that we had heard about, we had talked about, and we knew Microsoft was making this game system. We knew about the computers, so we figured if they're making a game system, it's got to be, top of the line game system that, is going to run probably the best out of all the ones that are currently out. But I remember being excited about it. I remember hooking it up and turning it on for the very first time, and just feeling like this is it. Um, so that's kind of my memory of it whenever it first started. What do you remember anything differently, or is there anything that you're like, hey, this is
Yeah,
my point of view on the whole thing?
I just remember it being kind of open and everything, and me not. I think at that time I was excited, but also like, what does it do? Because like I don't think I
Hmm.
heard as much about it. I mean, nowadays we have the internet, social media. We have a lot of things that publicize everything else all over the internet. You get to hear about new things all the time, pretty much on your phone all day long. But back then, I mean, as a kid, I wasn't into the news and all that stuff a whole lot. So what opening it, it was kind of like, what, a new system? Like, this is going to be awesome. Um, and just being able to turn it on, see that amazing Xbox screen come to life. That like green lava, almost like lava lamp kind of screen, boot up screen into the Xbox. Logo.
Yeah.
It was quite memorable at that point. It was like the first time you get to see like such a cool screen. The Nintendo was pretty good, but that one, the Xbox took the cake on that one, I think, at that time frame. So it was neat
Yeah.
to experience and just figure out what was going to go on with it.
Yeah, and I think that the loading screen itself, just turning it on, was weird because we didn't have a PlayStation. I mean, I did briefly, but that didn't really have like much of a startup screen. This one like really like caught your attention the moment you turned it on. It blazed, that noise would come on, and this little green goo would be floating in the air, and it was like whoa, like it drew your attention like immediately. Like this is something like we've never experienced before in our gaming, in our gaming universe at that time, our little one. So that definitely, the first time we turned it on, it was like, whoa. And then the game that came with it, I don't know if you remember or not, but it was that Jet Set Future Radio and that racing one. They always came together. They were like a
Yeah.
duo disc.
Yep.
And just having a disc, honestly, was kind of weird for a lot of us, because we had the cartridges that we used mostly on the N64. So having something with a disc that we put in, and even hitting the button and the little ring flashed around,
Hmm.
that was just cool. I thought the system itself was very slick looking. Like it was black, it was very sleek, and it just was so different from what we've had before. Like it just looked like a beast. Like I'm like, this thing is cool. Like this is just awesome in its own way. It has very unique characteristics compared to an N64 or like the NES. It was just like this manly machine looking thing
Yes.
for
I
lack of
liked it in
lack
black
of a,
for sure.
yeah,
Black
yeah.
made the green pop for sure, and I also like, I was gonna say with the discs, it was something you had to get used to. Like, hey, I can't blow at this or hit it against the wall a couple of times and then it all of a sudden it'll work. No, if it got a scratch on it, deep enough, that game was toast. So we had to learn how to take a different type of care with this unit too, like with the games, especially, putting them back in their cases, that sort of thing. With a, N64, you just put the cartridge somewhere and, blew out the dust out of it later if you wanted to play it, sort of thing. So that was definitely a lot different.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember the controllers too. Um,
Oh yeah.
the controllers, the one in the picture we have here was a controller that would come with some consoles. This thing was big. This was the big Xbox controller.
The
And I
fatty.
tell you, I don't know about you, but my hands were not big enough for this thing. I don't know what person they had used to kind of mold their hands around this thing, but this must have been a big person, okay, with big hands. Um, it was a good controller. Don't get me wrong, but it was just like way too big for me, and it just was almost comical on how big it was, sitting in your hands most of the time.
Yeah, it was like Andre the Giant. There's who they used to to
Exactly.
mold their controller after, because it was like, especially as a kid, you couldn't like hold it, and like there's no going from the top thumbstick to that D-pad, or I guess it's kind of a D-pad. It's supposed to be a D-pad. Like you couldn't really do that as a kid. Like it wouldn't shift. And same thing with the buttons. Like you couldn't hit the buttons and then go to that second thumbstick, because like it was such a massive controller. As a kid, you can't reposition your hand fast enough. Like it was just a
Yeah.
very um huge controller. Like it was heavy too. It was just like this massive brick of a controller. And you can even see, compared to the console, it's almost like half the size of the console. Like in this
Yeah.
picture, like it
Yeah.
was just so big. Um, so coming from the NES controller, the Super NES controller, to the N64 controller, and then going to this, I mean, what was your take on which one do you think was better? They always say N64 was the worst controller ever made, but this
Uh,
one, I don't know.
I don't know, man. I would, looking at this Xbox controller again and getting the flashbacks, the PTSD from using this thing, because even like trying to hit that little white or black button above the Y and B button, getting up there to hit those buttons if you had to, and then going down back to your joystick was impossible for me. Like it was difficult. I had to like look down back at the controller to know where my hand was going. Um, so in my case, the the N64 controller was actually what I would say is better than this particular Xbox controller. Um,
Yeah.
it, the N64 was just so much easier. I know it had 3 wings on it, that looked funky and everything else, but I don't know, something about the holding the lightness as well. Like it was lighter. I think the N64 controller was too. This one was a little heavier for sure. Which
Yeah.
then you also then thought, it's probably made pretty well and had some good guts in it. But I have to go with N64 as still being better than this controller. I don't know, like anytime we had this as an extra controller, like I hated giving it to somebody and I also didn't like using it. So I always felt bad like either giving it to somebody to use or me using it. Like it was always the excuse though, if you lost the game, well, I got the big controller. No wonder why I didn't do good. I
Yeah.
had the big one. Like,
Yeah.
what
That
was your take?
I would
What's yours?
I would say this is the worst controller ever made. Like honestly, like just because of the size. Not now, it did introduce things that we didn't have before, like the trigger buttons. Those are awesome.
Yeah.
The analog sticks were way smoother and better than the N64. The buttons felt better to me too, on this thing, but it was so massive that it just didn't matter what they made nice about it. It just wasn't fun to play with because it was just so big. Um, and two, like even that center piece where the Xbox is, like that was as big as the disc for the GameCube. Like it was just
Yes,
such a
it was.
massive controller. Like, um, they did fix this though. They did fix this. They understood that people did not like this controller, and eventually came out with the smaller version, which that one was a major upgrade. Like that one, a lot smaller. It was more compact, and that controller was fantastic. I mean, again, you had the awesome triggers on the back. You had your 2 analog sticks. I mean, it felt nice in your hands finally. But this one was a huge trip for their launch to have such a bad controller to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. The smaller version, I felt like I can keep in my hands all day long. That was such a comfortable controller. The
Yeah.
Xbox had made, Microsoft had made. It was like you said, the triggers were smoother. You could get to the buttons and to the joysticks and things way easier. Um, I just liked it all the way around. The slimmer Xbox controller for sure. I agree with you there. That was a major upgrade for Microsoft to get people more comfortable with playing their console for sure.
And one other thing that they did with the controller too that I liked was they had like the towards the end of the cord next to the console, they had a little clip, almost like a clip thing for your cord. So, like
Yep.
if someone ran in front of the system and tripped, instead of it ripping the cord out of the system and maybe breaking something in the system, it would detach that cord. So that was a cool feature, like a safety feature almost for your Xbox to help with the control slots. The only issue was if those were tripped up too much, eventually it became loose, so loose that it wouldn't really stay on, or it'd
Yep.
have a connection problem, and then it wouldn't work because that came apart. But I guess it did save the slot there instead of you having to fix the whole Xbox. You maybe had to buy a new controller. But I remember too with the controllers, like we had to be very careful. This system was expensive for us, my parents to
Mm.
buy, and we even had to um, whenever we were done the cords, we had to wind them up in a certain way so as to not like put any stress on the cord on the controller. They had us do very specific things so like we didn't hurt the system anymore, especially at first. They were really particular about it because it was just so expensive. They didn't want us breaking anything right away. So I know that this is the era of Doritos, Mountain Dew, and Xbox, but we couldn't eat Doritos and play on the Xbox like we could on the N64 because they were like, no, we're not gonna cake this thing with food. Like you have to treat this with like respect. Like
Yep.
they were very particular about it. Ian, especially our oldest brother, he wanted to make sure this stayed as pristine as possible while we played it. So he was kind of like the sheriff of it to make sure everything was running okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It helped a lot when Microsoft eventually down the line, third parties and things started making wireless controllers, stuff like
Hmm.
that, where you didn't have to worry about tripping over the cord as much or winding the cord up. But then you had to worry about batteries. You had to figure out, do I have enough battery? Or if your battery died while you were playing, you were like, I got no controller. I'm I'm dead in the water. So, but yeah, we try to take good care of that thing. Um, it's been in the family. That Xbox is still in the family today. Um,
Yeah.
that's another story, but it kind of survived the lineage of all of us kids, and one of us ended up keeping it, and our younger brother ended up keeping it, I think. And then he told me that he had it, and I was like, "You do?" And he's like, "Yeah, but it doesn't work anymore. Like it doesn't turn on, that sort of thing." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of down disheartening, you know." And I was like, "Well, let me take it. If you're not going to use it, it's just a brick sitting in your room or in your basement closet somewhere, whatever." And I ended up getting into it, breaking it apart, and fixing the thing. It still works today. I got a couple extra parts in there, and it works just like new. Pretty cool.
So this is 20 some years later, and it's still running smoothly.
Still
That's
kicking.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know too. I kind of wanted to. We mentioned it briefly, but I did want to kind of go over the menu on this thing too. Let me
Oh yeah.
do this here. There you go. So you got into the Xbox itself. You got past this green startup screen, and then this is what you were shown. If you didn't have a disc in, if you had a disc in, it would play automatically. But you had this cool menu too that almost like they were trying to capture like a futuristic type of feeling in the Xbox itself and just show its power. So this green, neon lime greenish stuff is what was kind of popular at the time.
Yeah.
Surge and Mountain Dew were part of this too. So it's like green was the color for Xbox. Like this is it. But what's cool about this system too that we've never gotten on any previous ones was this played music, this played DVDs, which were new newer at the time. Like the whole switch from VHS to DVD was kind of happening in this era. So having an extra DVD player in your game system was like a huge benefit. People love that. Um, and also too, you could play music on it too. So people were like, "Oh, hey, this is like a multifunctional system that you can do all these different things with that you couldn't do before." So not only did it appeal to kids, but now adults and teenagers, parents, they were more apt to be like, "Oh, hey, this is not just a game system. I can do tons of things with this." So it definitely was way more appealing than game systems ever had been before.
Yeah. It Xboxes, they Microsoft put internal hard drives into these systems, which, a lot more space could then be
Hmm.
available on the console as well, which was a great thing. When you're downloading music or putting music on there, you put in your burnt disc that you got music from somewhere else off the internet or whatever. You put your disc in, it would play, and then you can also download the songs onto the console. And then you didn't have to put that disc back in every time to play music and stuff. You can actually put it on the console itself, which having that hard drive space was a big upgrade for them too. You could save a lot of game data, a lot of game saves on this thing without having to, plug in a memory card. And the controllers did have memory card slots and things like that. If you wanted to take your game save home with you, if you were at a buddy's house or
Yeah.
something, that was a great thing about this Xbox too. Is just being able to save all that stuff. Another great feature, as you can see in the picture, Xbox Live, right? So we had the internet on this console where you could play online with others, which is a big major leap, I think, in all consoles and just game consoles in general. Um, Big leap forward when you can play with a buddy, at his house from your house and get online and socialize. That was like the big jump, I think, for Xbox in this case.
Yeah, and the thing with Xbox Live too is, PlayStation 2, which we'll talk about here in a bit, they also had online services, but Xbox Live is where, it was at because it just was a better service all around, it seemed. It wasn't as glitchy. There's a lot of times you drop out on PS2, but on Xbox Live it seems like you had a lot more stability because it was Microsoft. I mean, if anyone's going to have the best online capabilities, it's going to be the people who make most of the PCs. Like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
they're just going to have the capabilities. They're not borrowing from anyone. That they're just using their own materials to do that. So whenever you're playing online for the first time and you did it on Xbox, I remember commercials too about people talking to each other and how you could change your voice to sound like Darth Vader or make it whatever you wanted your voice to be like, so you could even talk to people. A lot of times we would just type. I remember there'd be people who'd say stuff, and we would just type, and we'd have even like a little keyboard that you would connect to the controller. I don't know if this is Xbox or Xbox 360. It was one or the other, but there was a little keyboard you could hook to the controller and actually type in messages as you were playing. So it definitely was like it opened up this whole new world that, the couch sitting on the couch and playing games was fun, but now you could play with somebody over in Europe or in Canada or wherever, and you're playing Xbox with them to see how you compete with not just your neighborhood kids, but also too like how you compete uh, in the world, how well you do.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
cool.
it was good. Plus, LAN parties with this thing. Get
Oh
into some of
yeah.
the games that we used to play, like Halo, stuff like that. I mean, how many times do we have, 5, 6 Xboxes in one house, linking them all together and
Yeah, that was.
hanging out with good times with other guys. It was a great time.
Yeah, speaking of games, that's the one you have to talk about if you talk about Xbox is Halo.
Yeah.
That game changed. I felt like changed the scene for so many industries when it comes to gaming, because it brought this whole new level of just entertainment and almost addictiveness to games, because it was the first time you were playing online. The game that you were playing was super super fun, and it was just a smooth game overall. And whenever you got with friends, whether you were online or in their house, it was like that was the game we would float towards. It's like, hey, let's play some Halo, because it was just fun to banter and just see who was the best overall. And it wasn't a sports game. A lot of people aren't into sports games. And it just kind of connected with a ton of people, because regardless of who you were, you could pick up that game and have a good time. It wasn't um it was an even playing field. You got out there and you had to scour and try and find who had the best or where the weapons were. And so you could be someone who stinks, but then all of a sudden you find a rocket launcher and you're
Yeah.
just winning. Like
Yep.
like you're just like, I found the rocket launcher, like everybody watch out. Like uh, so that definitely changed the scene. Again, you're saying LAN parties. I remember going over to people's houses and they'd have, all these hooked up. We'd have pizzas ordered and we would just all night long just play Halo. We would bring TVs. You had to bring back in the day, you had to bring your own TV, you had to bring
Yep.
your own system, you had to find people with controllers. If you didn't have four controllers, like we needed four controllers. So like, okay, does so and so have extra? Like, oh, we gotta make sure we have them. And then the other thing was is remembering to bring your stuff home. You'd end up with someone else's controller, or someone
Yep.
ended up taking yours, and you're just like,
Yep.
no, like that was my favorite controller. So you'd have to like somehow mark it. Remember we used to like
Yep.
I remember the game cases, we put like our initials in the game cases. I don't remember what we do with the controllers. It was like we would do something. So I think it might
We
have been
put like a little
whiteout. We
whiteout. Yep.
Yeah. We take white out and like put like an initial or put like a certain like symbol or something, so we knew, hey, this is our controller, because we didn't want someone taking that home with us. But that's one of those memories that I don't think will ever go away. Of like, this was to me like one of the best times in gaming, where you just get together with a huge group of people and play something. It wasn't two players like it was on the Super NES, or just four players. There wasn't coordinating, with
Wow.
mom and dad to see if who could come over whenever. It's like, no, let's just hop on Xbox and hit live, and I'll just play with whoever I want. Like, and no one
Yeah.
has to worry about it.
Yeah. It was a
But
lot easier then, for sure. Um, and people did a lot of cool things with those Xboxes, too, with the games and everything too. It eventually came out where you could adjust mods and things inside the Xbox as well. Um, Kind of like a little chip that would download the game that you put in onto that big hard drive I mentioned earlier. So I think you
oh
had
yeah,
one, didn't you? You had a modded Xbox.
oh yeah, and we took full advantage of that thing. We went out, and back in the day, whenever there was Blockbusters, they had what was called the Summer Game Pass, and you could rent, I believe it was two games at a time, but you had to keep them for 24 hours. And then after those 24 hours, you could come back and then trade in those two games for two more games. And it was like you paid a certain amount and you could just keep doing that all summer long. and we rented every Xbox game that there was in
Yes.
that Blockbuster, and we
Yes.
downloaded it onto the Xbox. It was like we're getting all these free games basically. Like you had to pay that rental fee, but I mean, you just had access to all these games at Blockbuster. Any new ones that came out, I think it gave a thing on there too that like new games that came out, like you had first dibs on them. So we would
Yep.
just go rent like brand new games, take them home, burn them onto the Xbox, and then be like, all right, like now we have this. Like, it was pirating at its best.
We may have been the reason Blockbuster went out of business. Um, there's still one, I think, out there in Oregon somewhere. Another Blockbuster still alive somewhere.
Yeah,
But yeah, people did that to it. Yeah, I think you had to have a little bit of a soldering expertise to get that job accomplished. But if you knew how to do it, you knew how to do it. So it was a great console. Another game that I remember playing a lot was Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront. When that came out, that was like if we weren't playing Halo, we were playing that. Eventually, it was a little bit more of a milder game, and also um, it was just fun to play. It was a Star Wars game, right? I mean, Star Wars, that was like a big deal um, around that time too. The prequels
yeah,
started coming out and things like that. So Battlefront was really fun. I remember playing that game for hours on end. Uh, Battlefront 1
yeah.
and then Battlefront 2 came out later, and Battlefront 2 was even better than 1. Being able to play as like a hero or a villain, like Darth Vader and Yoda, or however you want to do it. But that was such a great game. We literally, I think we played like you could get on that game and like put the certain maps on like repeat, and you could literally just sit there and play the same maps on repeat, like in the same rotation, and just keep going all day.
Yeah,
That was a great game on Xbox for sure that we spent a lot of time on.
yeah. That game. So what had happened with us too is Halo, with its popularity, eventually caught the eye of parents, and so they didn't like us playing that game for good reason, especially how young a lot of us were. Like maybe we shouldn't play a game that's mature, things like that. So it was like once that was kind of um, taken away, I'd say to a different time. So that got taken away. So it was like Battlefront. That was like about the time Battlefront came out. So it was almost like, well, we can't play Halo because you don't want us playing something so violent, understandably. So this is like, well, we're shooting robots now. Like this is fine. Like this is Star Wars.
Yes.
Everyone knows Star Wars.
Star Wars.
So so it was like almost like that like interjected, and that had online play too. You can play online with that one, and I think that one was so much fun because it wasn't just like, hey, me versus you. You could be like, hey, we're going to be on a team and try and defeat these, try and defeat the Empire. We're going to try and defeat the CIS, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We can come together and try to beat them, or you could be opposing teams. And then even if you're really really good at the game, if the other person kind of knows the strategic way of going about destroying, your team, then you still would lose. So it's like you had to be very strategic in that game. And it was the first really game like that I've ever played where it wasn't just 1v1 or 1v,
Yeah.
everybody versus everybody. It was like, hey, you have to kind of think about what you're doing because if you're just not paying attention, they could win just by simply, taking bases or,
Yeah.
they could have certain areas that they could destroy. Like I remember on one level there were ships that were in the back that kind of helped generate more of your team, and then if you went and destroyed those, then it would like bring down your team drastically. Like they could no longer spawn there, so like it really hurt your team. So you had to like be careful to protect that area. There was
Yeah.
just so much with those games that just rocked. That I think they were popular, but they weren't as popular as what they could have been. I don't know why. I think people just saw Star Wars and they kind of was like, okay, it's just another Star Wars game. But that one was those two were just so different and so much fun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
um, I think it's one game that I think grew the popularity of Star Wars as well. There was obviously plenty of other Star Wars games, but I think that game got me more into Star Wars growing up. Like I wanted to know more about it and that sort of thing. I mean, I watched Star Wars, the the originals and everything else, sure. But that one, I don't know, it got me more involved with Star Wars in general. And then once Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic came out, Star
Oh
Wars
yeah.
Tour, that one really got you involved into a storyline of Star Wars and being, you know, an open world map. That game had to have been huge. Like to be able to put it on a
Yeah.
disc and see it and be able to choose kind of your own path. That was a really iconic game for Star Wars and for Xbox, really, to get to nail that game down as well as they did.
Yeah, yeah, that's it was again, it was almost like this was the renaissance of Star Wars games. Like this is like the best time to be a Star Wars fan. I know people say, "Oh no, it was the 70s whenever it came out, Star Wars first came out, like it was this big shock." But I'm telling you, as far as gamers go, this was the best time to be a Star Wars fan. Like,
Yes.
you I mean, Xbox over the time that it was alive, I mean, just a few years, they just had banger after banger of Star Wars games. And KOTOR was a huge one. I mean, it got so many awards, and people love that one so much. That one and the second one, even to this day, people clamor that that's what Disney should do. They should just do a live action version of that game because it was just so good. And I never played a game that took, 40 hours to beat. Like that was just wasn't me. Like you played
Yeah.
Mario, and you beat it in, a couple hours and you were done. So that was the first time I had actually like have to sit down and play for 40 hours. I remember being in my room and I had put tape around the windows with a blanket to shut out all the light, and I'd shut my door and I'd sit there, and the first planet takes you like 8 hours to get off of, and I'd just sit there and play till I finished the first planet. Like like like
It would take
uh
forever.
and that's why I'm so pale. It's not because the red hair, it's because of Star Wars on Xbox.
Yeah. It's all Star Wars' fault. No. The lack of
Yes.
sunlight that I did not get as a child. Um, nah. No, that was definitely a great game for Star Wars for sure. And even being like I said, being able to choose like your own responses in that game was a whole new thing. Being able to
Mhm.
choose a response and choose almost a different story or a different path for your character almost made the replay value of that game also really high. Like you could go and play and be like, I'm gonna be the dark side, I'm gonna be Sith, I'm gonna be mean and everything else. And the next time you're like, okay, I'll try to be nice this time. I'll try to be good and Jedi like. And so the replay value was even high. So you after you got playing it for 40 hours, you're like, now I gotta do it again because I gotta know what else would happen if I chose the other side. So it
Yeah.
was a great way to get people involved in that game for sure.
And the ending of that, it's hard to be light and at the end of that game for me because like I'd use the only way I beat it was using the lightning. Like
Yeah.
that's what I would do like the whole time at the last battle. So if you were like nice and you didn't have that up, oh man, it was rough trying to get through that. Like,
So you
but
were you were half you were nice half of the time, and then you ended up going to the dark side. Is what it normally happens
yes,
because
yes.
it was just easier.
Do you
Um,
remember the Wookiee planet on that though? The Wookiee planet was the worst
oh yeah,
because it would have obviously people would speak, but also have what they're saying at the bottom of the screen, had captions for them.
yeah,
Well, the Wookiees, they speak Wookiee. So, like, for hours, like 5 or 6 hours, it's
yep.
you're just like, dude, stop. Like, they should not have done this. Like,
And
like
it's
it was
conversations you
so
can't
annoying.
just skip through. You have to listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to read it and then hit and then read it and then hit because it's like, you just, after a while,
Yep.
those Wookiees, it was like, dude, this is rough. I don't know why they did this. But those games were great. Another one, we know when we had Mario Party was kind of like the big thing on the N64 and on the GameCube, which we'll talk about later. But there was also a party game that we really enjoyed that came to the Xbox, and that was Fusion Frenzy. Do you remember this game?
Yes, I remember this game. This game was like it was like Mario Party. Well, not really. You didn't really need a map. It was just mini games that you guys had played together and seen who won. That sort of thing. And it was very creative games too. Like you could pick up materials, drop them into certain things. I remember like I think there was a one about fireworks. You had to put like the big fireworks in like a launcher and launch them off, stuff like that, or it was a sumo one where you were in like a big bubble ball. You had to knock everybody else off. It was a great party game. You know, if the Nintendo it was acting up or being, you know, temperamental, whatever, it was a good secondary game to be like, oh well, I have Fusion Frenzy, which is a mini game that we can play for everybody, and it's kind of like a party game, good for all ages. Nothing too crazy there, and bright colors. I remember the color of that game was different as well. Like it was very bright and bold, and which it's appealing to a lot of people too. So it was a great game. We had fun with it, man.
My favorite was who can climb the spiral staircase the fastest. That
Oh,
one was really.
and you had like things coming down the stairs at you to like knock you
Yes.
back. And if you got knocked back far enough, you lost. You fell down the stairs and you were just done. You were out of it.
Yeah, it was.
And it got
It was
faster and
like,
faster, and you had to be so quick.
yeah, absolutely, and it was like, it was just so weird to me that it's like that was the game, like climb the stairs the fastest. Like it just was like it was fun, but like it was just a weird concept. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was ridiculous, but it was fun. It was fun. Um, so other games that were more popular that we had and unfortunately gotten rid of, Marvel versus Capcom 2. Do you remember this?
I do remember this game. This game on Xbox it was great. It was a good game, good fighter game, 1v1. But being able to select three different characters on your side or on your team from Marvel or Capcom, you can mix match whatever. That was a really cool idea. I think having that kind of Street Fighter feel, but being able to swap out characters, select the three, was really cool. And then being able to have like a super power up move, you can all three of your characters can come in and do all at once. That was also like a big upside. So, fight combos were obviously a good thing to have in those types of games. You had to learn the fight combos, but then having just one powerhouse move where you could just end somebody was also like a huge deal in that game. Um, the game was not, it was popular, but it didn't circulate as well as what Xbox wanted or what Marvel may have wanted. Um, Crazy thing about that game, um, Xbox actually became obsolete when that game was being manufactured. So when Xbox did become obsolete, that game didn't they didn't get as many copies out because it was gone. It was over. Microsoft cut funding, and they were like, okay, well, we only got so many of those games out in person. So if you found one early enough, you got it for what it would normally be on sale for, a normal Xbox game, new game price, whatever. But after Xbox became discontinued and that happened, that game's value increased very quickly.
Mhm.
I think we bought it. I think I bought it for like 10 or $15, and I went into GameStop one day to trade it in. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna get like
I
25
think we got
cents.
it at a Blockbuster, didn't we? Wasn't it a Blockbuster, like one of those sale things? I
Yeah,
thought
I
it was
think
in
we
that
got it like,
case.
yeah, it was like
Yeah.
it was like a Blockbuster on sale item. Yeah.
Hmm.
I went to go trade it in, and of course, I'm thinking GameStop, maybe I'll get 5 cents out of it. um,
Yeah.
but
We were kids and we traded stuff in at GameStop, even though it was a horrible idea. Don't do it. Never do it. It's never worth it. It's never worth
no,
it.
it's
Anyways.
not, not worth it. But to my surprise, the guy scanned it, and I was like, "Why are you giving me so much money? Like, what game was I giving you that was worth that much?" It was like GameStop was willing to give me like $85 trading credit for that one game. I was like, "What?
That
What is
means
the deal?"
that means it was worth like $500.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Like
they're giving you
I was sweet,
$85.
and I think I ended up just giving it to him because I was like, "Sure, $80, yeah, like that. I only paid like $10 for it. This is awesome."
Yeah.
Not knowing what had happened with that game during the franchise of Microsoft and Xbox. So I gave it up, and that is one game I regret giving up for sure. It's not nearly as
And this
expensive
one,
now because I think Microsoft has um, has made it downloadable. I think you can now like just download it on your Xbox
um,
now.
Well, I think there's a fighters collection that's coming out here soon. I think that's like next week is the digital September 12th, and then two, I think they're coming out with a physical copy too of it being available, and it's had other releases too. So it's kind of and Xbox is not really a place too many people go back to. Usually, if you're going to play this game, there's other means uh, to play it now. So it definitely lost its value because of that. So it's not near as expensive as what it was back then. But I think this is cool too because this is kind of I feel like our first like Street Fighter esque, fighting game.
Yeah.
That's like kind of what I felt like. Like we didn't really play Street Fighter. We didn't really go to arcades. We never really knew what Marvel vs. Capcom, the first one. I don't think I ever played that one. Like at this
No,
time.
no,
So getting this game, it was like a whole new world kind of opened up a little bit. Like, oh hey, this is like totally different from Super Smash Bros. Or Kirby. Like this is
yeah.
you have to be more serious about things and understand and uh, learn moves in order to get combos off. Like I feel like that was what made this you know just unique to us, and also too it was fun getting those, like you said, the supers. It was a lot easier. I think it was like you click two triggers and you're able to like get that move off. So like it was cool just to like build up to that and then like hit it so you could do it. And
Hmm.
I still remember a couple cousins of ours coming over. They come over, every so often, and that's one of the things we'd play is Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Like, let's play. And our one cousin, he'd always beat us. I'd be like, "Well, I can take you out Super Smash," and he's like, "This ain't Super Smash, okay? This is a real fighting game. This is a real fighting game."
Yes, the excuses because they knew that they would lose if we played Super Smash.
Yes, exactly. They're like, "Oh no, we can't play
Oh
that."
no, we can't play
This is
that. That's not a real fighting game.
yeah. Even though it is a real fighting game, it is a real fighting game. It's just different. It's a different fighting game. Um, but yeah, and then so we had our Battlefront, we had Marvel vs. Capcom, but we still miss, some of the Halo stuff. So again, Star Wars said, "Hey, we'll come to your rescue. We're gonna make something called Republic Commandos, which is basically Halo Star Wars."
It was
I
such a good
have
game.
such a good game, and it was basically the four troopers that were cloned as almost like super soldiers. That was a team of four, and they would be taking on these missions that were, very basically like suicidal missions that were really, really hard that the average soldier couldn't do. And they did kind of like a darker take on Star Wars from the clones' point of view. And it was honestly it was short game. It was short. That's what people's main complaint was. It was very short, but it was fun. I mean, I love that game. I played that one all the time. They had hints of like General Grievous is in there.
Hmm.
Towards you see him a couple different times, and that was before Episode 3. So like we didn't know much about General Grievous, and he was supposed to be like this awesome, awesome, indestructible dude that could just take on anyone. And we were highly disappointed when we saw Episode 3, and he was not that at all.
No, no. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, that game was great. I remember playing it and just being able to like feel like you're an elite clone is I'm always like the idea of like a clone soldier kind of thing. And being able to be like an elite commando, and then also like when you're able to like the three just do certain things, you feel more like you're a part of like an elite squad. And
yeah,
you're being able to command people. I love Sev. He was the red clone out of all of them, and man, he could hit anything on the off the broadside of a barn. That guy was the best sniper. You put him in the sniper position every time because you knew he was going to have your back no matter what. He was so good at that game. And
yeah,
then I think they also had a multiplayer where you could play against each other as well on that game. Um,
yeah,
and that was fun too. It was like you said, it was kind of like that Halo-esque kind of combat. You could pick up different weapons and things around the map and that sort of thing. And that was a lot of fun with people too. If you got other people involved in multiplayer, that was a great multiplayer game. Like you said, the main story wasn't very long, but once you got people into it to play multiplayer and versus, it was way more fun, and your replay value went way high that way.
Yeah, and what made it unique too was you were a team of four, like you were saying, each individual clone had like their abilities which they were better at. So you had Fixer who kind of, if you were needing to fix something, there was a console you had to get into or something that was damaged and needed repaired, like he was a lot faster at it. You could have any clone do it, but like if you wanted it done faster, they could do it. Or like Scorch, did more of the explosives. So if you need a door open with a explosion, or you need to put something on a enemy territory, like a bomb or something, like he could do that a lot faster. Fixer could do it, or Sev, at least Sev is the red one. Is
Yeah.
he? Yeah, Sev could do that, but he's just slower at doing it. So and then he's better at being a sniper, something like that. So that's what was like kind of made it more unique and just made it more of an interesting game because it's like you could play out several different ways. So it's just definitely it was like Halo with a Star Wars twist.
Yeah.
And different mechanics all around. The worst was whenever you went through the droid factory and the super droids, what was it? Super battle droids. Those things were so hard to take down
They
in
were.
this game. It was like I mean, you'd unload so much on them, and they still would be standing. But at one point in time, you go through a factory full of those things, and if you would accidentally wake them up, like you had three of those things on you,
Yeah.
and then if you're shooting at them and you accidentally hit one behind you that's asleep, it also would wake up. Like it was like
You,
the worst part of the game. Like I hated it.
you better pray you had enough grenades because you just keep grenading the thing to death, and it was like the little head console that was on that super battle droid is what you had to kind of take out because it was more of its like critical hit point was like after you busted off that piece of it, then you can keep hitting it and it would make it go down faster in health. But still, it took like multiple clips before you even got it down to like a margin, a bit of health. It was yeah, you had to be good at aiming, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we'll keep moving along here because we're like 50 minutes in and we're still on Xbox, guys. This is how much we
Sorry.
love this system growing up. We're still on Xbox. Um, so we had obviously Xbox had a lot of sports games on there. They introduced the Streets. I don't know if you remember those two. They had like the Streets basketball volume. I think volume 1 and 2 is what I remember. And then they had the NFL Street 2, which was more of a brutal, NFL version of football that was introduced. So they kept taking these different sports and they would just kind of make it just like a twist, a little bit more rougher version of them, which you don't see now. Like, I mean, it's always just the same, Madden, NBA, 2K. That's just what it is now. But back then, they kind of wanted to bring it more to like playing in your backyard kind of roughness that they used to
Yeah.
have that you don't really have anymore. One game we wanted to make sure we talked about too, because this is one of those hidden gems that didn't get the popularity it deserved, and that was Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. It was such a fun game. It was one of those IPs that was very Mario, Crash Bandicoot esque, and
Yes.
it got great reviews. The game did, everyone who reviewed it said it was, very, very fun to play, had, an interesting story to it. And it kind of was, more kid friendly, like your Mario's. But it just wasn't very popular for whatever reason. But it was so fun playing that game. You were a Tasmanian tiger in Australia, and you had boomerangs. That was your weapon, and you would throw the boomerangs. You have your normal boomerang, then you'd have a lava boomerang, then you'd have
Yep.
a an ice boomerang. Like you just kept getting
Yep.
all these different boomerangs in order to get through different levels. And as a kid, we played that all the time. If you've never played it, you should go play it because honestly, it's very very fun game.
Yep. Yep. They did eventually come out with a sequel to Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 2,
Hmm.
like way later after the first one came out. I'm sure it's also a great game. I don't think I got to play that one as much. The first one was great because also the replay value was great. Because you could keep going to different parts of that open world and you kept trying to find hidden things. Like, how
Hmm.
we had those little Easter eggs when Nintendo started some of their games that have little Easter eggs where you try to find certain things or try to unlock certain like hidden secrets. That game also had them. So you could go in there and if you didn't have a lava boomerang, you couldn't get into a certain spot. So you had to walk past it until you came back later at another time, come back and unlock that area and figure out what was behind there. So that was also a great part of that game that I really appreciated. It's pretty fun. So
Yeah, and also too, I recently got it. I found out about it, and I recently got it. But they actually came out with a third one. I didn't know there was a third one that came out on GameCube.
cool.
Yeah, so this
I
one
didn't
on,
know that
and they
either.
had one for. I think they had one for Game Boy too. So they had altogether, it had 4 games, and it just like no one ever played that. I don't know why. It just didn't really resonate with a lot of people apparently, but it was really really fun. They actually came out with they redid the first and second one, and they had a Kickstarter or GoFundMe. I forget which one it was, but I was able to give them some money for that, and since I did. My name's actually in the second one, the new version. If you get it on modern consoles, my name's is one of the donators to get it to happen. So it's cool. Like
Oh,
it's yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yourself on the credits.
buy
That's awesome.
yeah, so if you buy Tai 2 for Switch or Xbox or PS5, and you're playing it at the end, you're looking at the donators, you'll see my name pop up there. So um also too, I wanted to mention something that was groundbreaking back then that now is existing even until today, and that is the Lego games. Lego Star Wars came out. This is the
Yes.
first Lego game that really resonated with a lot of people, and it too was just one of those games where you're just like, whoa, like this is so different. Like I can play all the Star Wars. I believe there was the prequel trilogy was the first one that came out, so you get to play episodes 1, 2, and 3 on there. So you could do all the stuff that you can't do. And it looked kind of messy, but it not be that bad because they're Lego people. You
Right.
could chop people in half, and it's like, oh, their head fell off. Well, he's a Lego, so who cares? Um, uh, and that one also was very addictive, and this led to a whole franchise of just everything Lego. Any type of IP that was big, like Lego version, Lego version, Lego version. Like,
Yeah.
um, and they kept improving on it. The newest Lego game, the Skywalker Saga. Honestly, usually after so many times it comes out, you kind of like, this is kind of dull. It's kind of had its time, but the newest Lego one, honestly, is even better. I don't know how they did it, but it's way more open world, a lot more stuff you can do on it too. But back then, playing this version of Star Wars in Lego form, it was just neat. It was a very different take on it, and just again, more Star Wars. The Renaissance of Star Wars, man. It was on Xbox, I tell you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered Xbox. It only took us about an hour. Like,
We played that thing, like I said, it was a workhorse. We played it all the time.
yeah. So next is one that I don't think will take very long. Unfortunately, we were not big fans of the PS2. It just wasn't our cup of tea. There still was the gaming wars that went on from back in, the Super Nintendo Sega times that continued on. Like, oh, we'd have N64 versus PlayStation. Then now it's Xbox versus PS2 and GameCube. And we landed on the side of Xbox. So we had a PS2. One of my older brothers, he had one, and it didn't get played very much. Like I remember playing Kingdom Hearts on it because someone at GameStop talked about how great this game was. As a kid, I didn't really care for Kingdom Hearts. Like I didn't get very far on it. I thought it was kind of a little bit almost too hard. I got to the three-headed dog thing in Hercules, and like I died like 3 or 4 times trying to beat him, and I was like, this is dumb. And I I never picked up a PlayStation 2 controller. I hated the controllers. Where the 2 analog sticks were at the bottom, I was like, this is so dumb. Why is this down here? And it felt weird in my hand. It pressed against the palm of my hands after I played for a little bit, and it was very uncomfortable for me. So I personally never really played the PS2 at all. I don't have very many memories with it. I don't know if there's anything else that you have.
Um, PS2, I didn't play a whole lot on PS2 either. Like you said, our older brother had one, and he was very fixated on it just being his, and he didn't want a lot of us other kids his brother's, playing on it and messing it up, or he spent his own money on it. So I mean, it was his, but I didn't get to play it a whole lot. Controllers, like you said, they weren't the best. And I think back then you were either an Xbox player or a PlayStation player. I think back then you just whatever you had is whatever you used. You didn't buy both. You didn't, you had one or the other, and we mostly had the Xbox. So, PlayStation just wasn't a thing we had, a lot of. I didn't have a lot of time with it. Um, but I mean, I like the console today. Like looking back, I have got to play them more as I gotten older. I did end up buying one later in life, just nostalgia purposes. Played a little bit, it is a good console, but I think a lot of the games that PlayStation came out, Xbox also had. So it was kind of like if you had one, you didn't really have to buy the other, unless you wanted an
Yeah.
exclusive game like Kingdom Hearts that only Sony had rights to. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
it
and
was a good console all around.
yeah, and their big ones were like they had Crash Bandicoot, they had Spyro the Dragon, they had, Tomb Raider, and it's like those all eventually came to Xbox. So it was kind of like, why would I buy a PS2 whenever eventually it's going to come out on Xbox anyways? So
Right.
there was games on there though that didn't come out, Ratchet and Clank, that I don't think ever came to Xbox. Trying to think of anything else that I really was like, oh, I wish we had that for Xbox. That not till later on. Now, eventually, PlayStation they take advantage of having exclusive games, but during this time, it's kind of was like they would have exclusive for a little bit, and then all of a sudden it just pop up on Xbox. Like it wasn't like it was a huge deal back then.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of that's kind of all I have for PlayStation. Again, I thought it'd only be like a 5 minute conversation, but I don't know if you have anything else that you remember or anything else that you want to talk about when it comes to
Um, Ratchet and Clank was a great one-player game for sure. It was a longer game, a little, little for the younger crowd. It seemed like it was more cartoonish kind of, but it had a lot of cool things too that you could collect and purchase, and new abilities and things too on that game that you can unlock throughout it. So it was a fun game. I liked it. I did enjoy that one, um, and it kept my attention when I was younger playing it. So it was a good game to play by yourself if you wanted a good one-player game, solo game that you could just kind of walk through maps and hang out and do that sort of thing. It was a fun game, fun adventure game for sure. Good storyline. So
yeah. And this is no disrespect to PS2 because it's like
no,
one of the top selling consoles of all time as the
yeah,
PS2. I mean, I think it is number one. If it's not number one, then it's close to number one. It was number one for a
it was
very
number
long
one for a
time, but
long, long time. Yeah,
yeah, if it's not still currently, it still could be. So it is obviously shows that it was an amazing console. I know it had a slew of games on it that were, a lot of people loved. It just wasn't our thing. That's what it comes down to. This wasn't us. We were more Xbox people. So unfortunately, if you came here wanting to have a deep conversation about the PlayStation 2, sorry,
yeah.
we
We can
just
get
don't
more
have it.
into we can get more into the PlayStation stuff a little later. I got
Yes,
way more into PS3 and PS4 and PS5 as time went on. I got more into PlayStation, so don't worry, those things
yeah.
are coming up
Later,
potentially later.
later on, the camps, the Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo camps fracture in our lives, so that they definitely get represented later on. But right now, this is kind of where we're at. Mom and dad's not buying us a PS2 after they just bought us an Xbox. It
No,
ain't happening.
no.
So, but with that said, that moves us on to the next system that was there, and that was the Nintendo GameCube. So, this was a system that I bought with my money. So, Case, our older brother, he bought the PS2. Eventually, I bought my own GameCube because I wanted something different, and I didn't care for the PS2. Um, but not too many people had this system. It wasn't very popular, unfortunately. I remember getting it, and mine was silver, and it came with a Game Boy player um, in the in the box. So that was like a huge plus back then because we had Game Boys um, back in the day. So that being able to take those, throw them up, on a big screen, it's almost like we had that ability to play twice as many games now because not only can we play GameCube games, but we can play all of our uh, Game Boy games on it. I remember getting this, and it was just a moment of um, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like this is my first like big purchase. Like this is the first thing that like I bought with my own money. That's the newest and greatest version of this company, like Nintendo. Like this was really cool for me to buy, and again, mine was silver. Um, the discs were different for sure. Whenever I got them, they had the little tiny discs instead of the big discs. That's something that Nintendo did. And I feel like this system always fought against itself. I don't know about you, but like there's so many things that they did right, and this is such a great system, but so many things that they did wrong that it just didn't do very well because of that. I mean, how do you
Yeah.
feel about it?
Yeah, it didn't lead itself into being um, future savvy. It definitely had its highlights. I mean, having a smaller disc, you're less likely to scratch it, that sort of thing, being smaller, a smaller surface area. So I mean, that was a great thing. But I mean, you couldn't put with Nintendo, it was cartridges all before this. So
Yeah.
anything like PlayStation, they had the ability. PlayStation 2 had the ability to play PlayStation 1 games. It was backwards compatible. That was a big thing for people to go after the PS2 versus an Xbox. GameCube here did not have that ability really. All before it had the Nintendo 64 cartridges, that sort of thing. Switching over to a disc for them from a cartridge was going to be obviously very, very difficult. So you couldn't do the backwards compatible thing. It was a great upgrade for the Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy player. That was a great idea. I don't know who came up with that idea, but it was great. That also didn't have a hard drive, no hard drive space in this unit, so it was memory card friendly. You had to get a pretty big memory card, but one memory card pretty much sufficed unless you had a really good big game that took up a lot of memory. You may need a spare one just for that game. Um, but one thing I liked about this is that it was a smaller console. It wasn't something bigger like the Xbox. And the original PS2 was also pretty wide and big as well. This thing, super compact. The thing even had, as you can see in this picture, it had like a handle. You could literally pick the thing up one hand, bring it wherever you wanted to go, and hook it up pretty easily. And I think that's what Nintendo was going for was you guys are going to be bringing this console over to friends' houses and playing with others because it is a big multiplayer. I think it had a lot of multiplayer games, a lot of Mario games that you could play like Mario Party and things like that. That made it really nice for sure.
Yeah. And again, they did so many things right, but it also ended up being so many things wrong because it's like it. I love the GameCube personally, but again, you had Xbox, which is this nice, big, sleek looking machine. You had the PS2, which is black, also looked, sleek, great looking console. And then you had this, and compared to the other two, this almost seemed like kind of kiddie. Like, you look at these other two, they seem more of adultish. Teens are trying to like be more edgy. And this didn't feel like that when it comes to game consoles. And then two, the PS2 and the Xbox, they had DVDs. You could play DVDs on there. So this one, obviously, you couldn't because they only did the small little discs, which prevented scratches, prevented people from pirating their games as easily. But I'm a parent, and I'm looking at which one to buy my kids, it's like, well, PlayStation 2 is the top selling one. Xbox, that can play DVDs. And then you had this one, and it's like this one seems like it's for like, little kids. Like this looks like if you didn't know this was a game console, like it almost looked like it'd be for, a 7-year-old. Like then this is the color that they promoted the most with this was this weird purple blue that also makes it look kind of kitty. um, I think that they should have promoted a different color when it came to this console, because it just added emphasis to like this is a children's item instead of it being like a serious console. And I think that's what really hurt it a lot was just the promotion of it. I thought it was awesome. This is honestly during this time was probably my favorite console just because had so many unique games, so many different things going on, but overall, I can see why it didn't do very well. It's not a mystery to me.
Yeah.
Like, it, compared to its competitors, it's hard to see, how they did well at all with this thing. Um, Now I will say this to me is like top tier controller. This controller is like my favorite controller probably of all time. To me, this is very comfortable in your hand. You had that big A button, which is the button you use 95% of the time in most games. And to get to access the other buttons, X, Y, and B, it wasn't a big move. You could just literally just tilt your thumb one way or another and you have access to those. Had the Z button at the top and then the two triggers. Those were really nice. The C button also wasn't hard to get to. Wasn't like the Xbox, giant thing. Even compared to the Xbox small controller, this one just felt better in my hands. And even to this day, if we play Super Smash or something, like I prefer to use this controller just because it's just so comfortable. Um, you know, and I don't think the Nintendo's ever come out with a more comfortable controller since then. Like,
Yeah.
um, their pro controllers now are to me are just Xbox controllers that are kind of smaller. It's just like a generic Xbox
And
controller is what it looks like or feels like to me. So this to me was like Nintendo's top tier controller, and I don't know if they'll ever be able to beat it. But that's my initial takes of the GameCube, though, on that. So, do you have like any memories with the GameCube that you remember, or anything that you wanted to bring up that you think was thoughtful when it came to it, or something that just is in the crevice of your nostalgia?
I I get what you mean by what it looks like. It looks like something like something for a kid, like a toddler, almost like a VTech or a jump start machine, from back in the day.
Exactly.
And it kinda looks like that kinda color, like something like a child would kinda use, but, um, I remember, the memory cards were kinda neat. I don't know why, I just thought they were kind of a good idea. It kinda made it to where, like, you had to go out and buy one if you had a certain game, but I liked it. I really did like the controller as well, it was very comfortable. When you're playing, one of our favorite games, Super Smash Brothers Melee on that console,
Hmm.
that controller was awesome. Having that B button right there, right next to the A button, and like you said, your thumb didn't have to move very far. Being able to get those combos and then getting Y to get yourself to jump, really easy to use that way. Um, and that's the big thing that I remember playing all the time was Super Smash Brothers Melee. Um, Big upgrade. I don't know about you to N64's Super Smash Brothers. So many more
Yeah,
characters.
huge, huge.
Oh, even graphically. I mean, I don't know. I would say GameCube kept up with the graphics still of the Xbox and the PlayStation at that time. It didn't lack in that area, I don't
Yeah.
think. Playing Melee was so much fun.
Hmm.
It just left you wanting more though, and that's what I think Nintendo really had to play off this console was we left you obviously wanting more from a console, so let's give you something more with the next one. But um, it's a great console,
Yeah,
man. I loved it.
yeah. Another thing that I forgot to mention too was this didn't have online play. Like there was like two
No.
games. Um, I think that you could technically use online play for. It's like two or three games, but like it wasn't very good. So again, it just was like, oh, you're doing so many things right, but like Nintendo's always kind of been like that though, where they're always like a couple steps behind. Even to this day, their online gaming is not very good. It's very glitchy. I'm playing Super Smash on the Switch, and it's like characters glitch out and they don't move, or I'm 2 seconds behind everyone else, so I'm getting rocked because like the online, it's just not very good. So yeah, that was just one of the things that I think really also brought it down. Like it just wasn't very popular compared to the other ones. It just couldn't compete at that time. Now you mentioned Super Smash Bros. Melee. That also was another one that we would play for hours on end because we love Super Smash, the first one, and this one was like a whole new take. This thing was like
Oh,
so
yeah.
much better, especially the C stick definitely helped with making things a lot easier to play. Unlocking characters, there was tons more characters to play with. different abilities they could use, and overall it was just way smoother. If you played Melee for a while and you went back to the N64, you were like, oh my goodness, you can barely dodge. Like,
Yeah.
like it's it's bad. It's bad. It's not good at all. Not good at all. Um, I'll stop sharing that then because we kind of know it. No, we know what it looks like, right? We know what it looks like.
Yeah.
But there were a ton of games on this system that just like if you thought we talked a lot about the Xbox games, get ready for this because like, I
Yeah.
had a slew of games that we would play on this thing too, and we the way we afforded a lot of these games, unfortunately, was GameStop. We would go in there and we'd buy it for $50 and go back in and be like, "Well, I want another game, so I want to trade it in for $10." Like we were young and dumb and did that a lot because that was really one of our only options. So a lot of these we ended up trading in or getting rid of, bought back later, or just have never been able to acquire again because we are dumb and we were dumb kids. We were dumb kids. But this came out with its generic lineup that every you know uh, Nintendo console comes out with nowadays. You had your Mario Kart, you had your main Mario game, Mario Sunshine, then you had Mario Golf, Mario Tennis, Mario everything. Like we had all of those that came out. The Double Dash would be the only one that I think was a real big highlight. I didn't care for Sunshine too much. Wasn't didn't give me the same feeling as the Super Mario 64 did. Um, but the Double Dash though, that was probably one of the best Mario Karts, especially being able, to play it in this 3D with a friend on the back, and you guys could play two players, and one person be the person with the items, one person be the one driving. Like it definitely was a different take on it, and gave you, just some different aspects of the same game. Had some great tracks, and again, looked phenomenal. Like you said, the games that came out on this, like it looked 64. So, I didn't know if there was any other, kind of typical games that came out on this that maybe you want to talk about that we always get with systems.
Like you said, classic Mario games. Mario Party was another one that Mario Party 5, that sort of thing. They came out on this console that was really good. When it comes to the classics, that was probably the main one. Another leap forward I think that I liked was that they kind of did another Star Fox video game on this console, the Star Fox
Mhm.
Adventure game, which was I think big for Star Fox in general and for Nintendo. It was a great RPG, and it was a good game. That was the only other highlight that I really liked. Briefly,
Yeah, that one was a whole different. That was not your daddy's Star Fox. That one was totally different. Like,
no,
it
we
was
were not in the
cool.
ship
Like I
the whole
liked it.
time.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely was something that was just totally a whole different genre of things. When it came to Star Fox, it had a little bit of the in your ship shooting like we had before, but in general, it just was like a whole new thing of it. Also, too, we had some revamps of some classic games like Metroid Prime. Metroid, always a side scroller type of game, but this one they kind of took a different take on that. It was a little bit darker. I felt like they were trying to get some more edgy games in there that felt a little bit more adult esque or teenager esque, so it would draw more people into that. And I think that Metroid Prime is definitely one of those. I mean, that one definitely, little kids aren't playing that. That's definitely meant for more, teens and adults, just because of how edgy that it was and all the how the graphics were kind of dark. And again, just had that about it. Another one that came out that was hugely popular was Animal Crossing. Do you remember first
Yeah.
Animal Crossing experience?
Oh man, Animal Crossing. You'd spend hours on that game just to pay your rent. That's pretty much how it felt. You're like, okay, I paid you now. It's over, and then it would be another thing that you had to pay for. And it was like, this is like teaching me to be an adult before I'm an adult. Um, but it was a great game. I liked that game a lot. This was a Nintendo game. Nintendo got smart with it because they realized that it's going to take up quite a bit of memory because it's a long game. And there's a lot to it. Fishing. and all that, and collecting the shells and everything else. Um, what I liked about this game is if you bought it new, it came with its own memory card for your GameCube, which if you get to see it, it does have like a little. It's gray and it has a little exclusive Animal Crossing logo on it. Um,
Yeah.
so it was a great idea. That was one of the highlights. But man, Tom Nook, he was quite the entrepreneur. Man, he knew how to keep you poor. That's how he knew how to do things. But it was great to like see a game where you can interact with like neighbors and being able to really customize your own little world. At that time, that was new. I mean, you had some maybe older sim games that you could play on PC, but you didn't have really a lot of like customization with a lot of games. This game really hit home with Nintendo on being creative. Making your own house look the way you want it to, and doing things for people and all that stuff, and collecting. Trying to be completionist, trying to get all the fish, trying to get all the insects into that museum took a long time. So, but it was fun. It was a good game, and then once you paid everything off, the replay value after that, you were kind of like, I don't need to play it anymore necessarily, not unless I want to collect everything. It was a good
Yeah,
game.
and collecting everything was like basically impossible. Um,
Yeah.
it was like you had to have everything certain. This was the first time I played a game like this too. Like that introduced me to a game that I never really thought of. But basically, it's just like, hey, you're living life. You collect different stuff, you sell it, you try to make money, you're trying to pay off your mortgage. And one unique thing about the game was this is one of the only games that you could through different scenarios, you could actually buy NES games within this game to play in the game. So it was like it
Yes.
was really cool. They never have done that again with any other Animal Crossing, but in this version, you could buy at certain points in times or earn NES games like Punch Out and stuff like that in order to play while you're in the game. So you could have these little systems in your house and just play around. It was like again living real life. Um, but but it definitely made a lot of people scratch their heads. I remember playing this in front of again friends, and they're like, "What is this?" And you're like, "Oh, you just kind of live life. You go fishing, and they're like, why don't you just go outside and do that?" I'm like, "Well, it's different, okay? Like I'm 12, okay? I don't have a mortgage. I don't know what that's like." like, so
Yes.
a lot of people were again they felt like it was kind of kiddie, which it kind of is. You have horns and you have little animal friends that you're playing with. So it definitely didn't help with the whole kid branding thing, but it was a fun game if you could get past that. Eventually, people did. Especially during the pandemic, like the newest Animal Crossing was like the number one selling game because people were like, "I want to live life again." So it definitely became, yeah, it became that. Hold on one second here. Let me pause this. All right, apologies for that brief pause there. We had some technical difficulties, but we are back. So with this Animal Crossing 2, like you said, it had that memory card that came with it. And when it came to the GameCube memory cards, remember they call it cubes. You had so many cubes in each
Mhm.
memory card. The regular size ones were 64 cubes, and then the bigger ones were 216 cubes. They're really just memory slots, kind of.
Yeah.
And so Animal Crossing took up a whole 64, so it was like they did a fourth of a other large one, so they came out with that one there. So I'm glad that they did do that because if they didn't, it would have been it kind of stink. Like,
Yeah.
like yeah, imagine buying that game. You get a GameCube, and that's one of the first games you buy, and you can't even play it because you have not enough memory, or you had to delete all the memory of your games that you currently have to play on it. So that was a right move in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now moving on to other games that were on here that maybe were a little more unique that we didn't play before. Uh, Along the same lines of things was Harvest Moon. Do you remember Harvest Moon?
Yes. Yes. That was somewhat similar to the Animal Crossing, but not. It was even more
hmm
lifelike. It was like living life on a farm, and having, other people to talk to, that sort of thing. This game was like you could milk cows, you could get eggs from chickens that you raised, you could like grow watermelons and stuff like that and sell those. You can be an archaeologist and dig for gold and stuff like that. There was just so much to this game too. And what was very unique about this game is you could have relationships with people on the game, and depending on what you did, like it varied. Like you could have a relationship with a girl in town and actually end up marrying that girl if you kept the relationship going, and you kept like giving her flowers and things like that. You could pick who you wanted to be your wife or your spouse in that game, which was a whole new thing with a video game too, having that extra thing that you're like, okay, and then you get a pet dog, that sort of thing. So it was a really cool game too. It was fun, and again, it was a game that you could play for so long and be completely happy with it still after hours and hours of playing, and be like, yeah, this is
Yeah.
great. Like, I had fun. So
Yeah, and to me too, it definitely was like a Animal Crossing on steroids. Animal Crossing was fun for collecting stuff and catching bugs, and kind of just more of a freeing life of just go out and play and blah blah blah. This stuff felt like more like someone who's actually living life. Each second was a minute, or each minute was a second, I should say. So 24 hours in a day was 24 minutes, and you had so many days in a season, and you would get tired. If you didn't rest, if you didn't eat, you'd get hungry, you'd pass out, and also the a lot of the story or the game was building relationships with others within the community. So it was you had to go and talk to certain people to get certain items, or you had to be at a certain friendship with people for them to make this cutscene happen. And it was just a really fun game. It was Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life. I should have been more specific.
yeah,
But that one was, I mean, we played that one forever, and you even eventually, spoilers if anyone who wants to play this, but you get your spouse, your wife, and then you have a child. That child grows up, and then you pass away at the end of the game. Like it's your whole life.
yep,
Like, and you leave the farm either to your son or you encourage him in a different way. Like, and there's so many different avenues you can take in the game. So actually, it has some replay value, even though it takes you hundreds of hours to end it. You almost want to play it again because you want to say, okay, what if I married this person instead? How's my child look? Or what if I, encouraged him to be an archaeologist instead of being a farmer? How would he act? Like it just had so many elements to it that Animal Crossing just didn't have. Um, and Animal Crossing to me get kind of boring. After you paid off the house, it kind of was like, okay, I'm done with this game. There's nothing really
yep,
to do. Like
yeah,
while Harvest Moon seemed to have more of an entangled uh, story and more things just to do and different levels. So definitely like that one a lot better, I think.
yeah. I
But
also liked how you could name your animals too in that one. You can name, your cow Betty or something. It was fun. I don't know. You can make up some silly names for like your chicken. I don't know why. I just thought
yeah,
it was fun.
and even your animal's happiness depended on like what they would produce. Like if your cow wasn't happy, then he would have bad milk. But if you like did certain things to make it happy, it would have better milk. And your eggs from your chickens, like if you made them happy, the chickens gave you better eggs. Like it had so many things that like you had that were entailed with it that you had to do in order to make a more successful farm as you played the game. So definitely highly recommended, especially if you're in that Animal Crossing section of things and you're looking for something that's kind of similar that gives you more of a game. That's one that I recommend. They actually came out with it again on Switch, but it is a little bit different than the GameCube one. But it's still really good. So definitely, if you're looking to something similar to Animal Crossing, check that one out. Another unique game that came out for the GameCube was Beautiful Joe. Do you remember this one?
Yes. This was like
You
a
can,
comic book style game. It was really cool. Um,
yeah.
you had you had to collect beautiful coins or tokens to be able to use your power throughout the map. It was a side scroller mostly. I mean, I think um,
Mhm.
but it was really cool. It had some funniness to it, like that comic kind of feel. The artistry of this game was really neat. The way they animated it, I think, was a really neat way to do it. Being able to freeze time and fast forward time and be able to knock out a bunch of guys really, 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 really fast because you could go really, really fast. It was like you were on a movie set in the game, and you could
Hmm.
like call cut and like pause time, or you could like fast forward the movie and like you'd be going through the scene really, really fast. So it was a really fun game to just beat them up, and it was actually a pretty neat storyline as well. It wasn't too bad, so it was fun.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely again was another one of those different ones that came out, and this was exclusively for GameCube for a while. Capcom made this for them, so it kind of reinvigorated a lot of us who were on the GameCube side of things. Like, hey, there is good games on the GameCubes. It's not just kiddie stuff. Like, look, we have Beautiful Joe, and it was really popular at the time. I remember seeing the big cutouts at GameStop and stuff, and posters, and they got great reviews. So it definitely was a great IP to have. Eventually, though, Sony stepped in with Capcom, was like, "Hey, we'd like this game too, and then they eventually got it themselves. So it kind of flattened out the whole, any puffing up you did, like, oh, GameCube has some good games. It kind of like folded that, but they did come out with a second one, I know, and a almost like a Super Smash version of Beautiful Joe that came out too, that you could fight with. But it was a fun game. Again, like you said, you're able to fast forward, rewind, and then slow down too. And so each boss you fight was unique. You had to figure out which combination of doing that could defeat the boss the fastest. I mean, like slowing down time made explosions go further. So like sometimes you had to slow down to like make an explosion happen. Sometimes you had to wait to a certain moment and hurry up and like hit the boss. So you'd have to like fast forward and like keep punching them. So it definitely was unique. The comic book side of it or the movie side of it, where they went through like old movies that they kind of used. There's like a bat one that was kind of like almost like a Dracula type of scenario. Then there was like a shark guy that was kind of like Jaws. So it had like a lot of these things that they included in there to like make it just fun and iconic, I guess. Those iconic characters. That's the word I was looking for. But yeah, so that one was great. I'm trying to think of other games that have come out on this that maybe people haven't really heard of or that we haven't talked about. One major one was a follow up to Paper Mario, which is Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. This game was cool. This is the best Paper Mario they've ever made. I don't see them ever topping this game, but it was just a different take on Mario again. It wasn't one of his generic Mario's that you always get with every console, but definitely one that you could just sit there and play for hours on end and have a good time while you're doing it. It's not too complicated, but just complicated enough uh, with it. So, do you have any memories of that or anything you want to
I
add?
I liked the aspect of the game that I liked the most was trying to get a new buddy. When you'd find somebody, and be like, "Hey," and like you buddy up with them or you help them out, and then they become your friend, and then you kind of get like a new ability by having them with you as like your partner in crime, you could say. Like your co-op kind of player that's kind of helping you out throughout the whole thing. I always thought that was a really good aspect of Mario, like being able to do that. Um, then later on Mario, if you played the other Mario side scrollers, obviously they made them like 4-player co-op later on,
Hmm.
which kind of added to that multiplayer aspect of Mario even more. But this one was just unique, having a CPU that actually helped, or like you could use to get further yourself or to get into secret spots, that sort of thing, was very unique to this. And I really liked how Nintendo really put it in there. And like you said, I think it's probably the best Paper Mario they've ever come out with. So very well done. I liked it.
Yeah. And two, which is this is with Knights of the Old Republic too. This is kind of our um turn-based games were not popular, especially amongst Xbox and game or Xbox and Nintendo people. Like there wasn't very many that we played. I guess amongst our friends and family that played games with. That's how I should say that because they were popular. But so like Paper Mario, Knights of the Republic, the turn-based turned a lot of people off. But for some reason, Thousand Year Door, like even though it was turn based, like still people were drawn to it because of the Mario aspect. Again, the easy gameplay, the thoughtful story, finding other people, like you said. There was all these different elements, and it was funny. A lot of the time, you'd be sitting there reading what people were saying, and you'd have to start laughing because it was just so ridiculous some of the stuff that they would say.
Yeah.
So it kept you going. Like you're like, oh, okay, this is funny. This is great. Like, come on, let's keep going. Uh, so my memories with this is again, this is another 30 or 40 hour game, depending on how you play it. And so again, it was different compared to the games we used to play on N64, and we're get almost branching off into this new territory of video games, and it just continues from here too. There's more and more games that are like that come out. Sonic 2, we also whenever we played Sonic briefly growing up because we didn't have a Genesis, if you knew from our last episode. I only played Sonic briefly a couple of times, and it was always a side scroller. Played it on my Game Boy some too, our Game Boy, I should say. So we only knew Sonic in the 2D side scrolling element of things. Well, then a game came out that changed that for us. We didn't know about until the GameCube, and that was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Now,
Yes.
this game was awesome. Like, I love this game. I I remember playing this game
Yes.
so many times and beating it so many times. I've gotten it, even rebought it for my Xbox, rebought it for my Switch. There's just something about this game that was so different from any other Sonic game, even from the first one, the Sonic Adventure, number one. I bought that one also on the GameCube. There's a director's cut that I bought, and that one just didn't capture me like this one did. This one, I played that one later. This one I played first, and it was so much fun to be 3 dimensional, going through all these crazy courses, playing, as Knuckles, as Tails, and just seeing the different characters and their element and how they all helped in different ways in order to try and beat Dr. Robotnik and this strange new Sonic that is appearing, and everyone's blaming Sonic for what he's doing, and it's this big mystery. Even though they look totally different, but somehow in the game, like no one can tell them apart. I'm like, this one's blue and that one's black. Like, how? Why would you say they're the same person? Like, I don't know. But it was really just a different game for the time for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that game was really fun. You can also play a multiplayer, like you can race each other on that game too, like through certain maps and stuff. That was also fun. You get to kind of pick your character. Shadow was always
Hmm.
fun to be. And then the other aspect of this game was like you can collect like little animals throughout the game, and you can also collect like little like vials that would you could you basically can take care of another little pet inside the game. It was called a chow,
Yeah.
and you could like have like 10 of these things. They like hatch from eggs, and you'd like give them a little animal, and they'd like get some of the characteristics from their looks from the animal that you gave them, and some attributes like better speed, or they could crawl faster or walk or run faster, or they could jump higher, or whatever it was. It was fun to like grow one of those little chows and then make them like really cool looking, or and then you can like do little mini games with those chows and like cheer them on and stuff. Have them do different competitions like climbing competitions and things. So that was a really fun aspect of that game that made that replay value again very high. I want to go back and like take care of my chow more, or make him cooler, or make him different. And you can have multiple ones. Like I said, you can have ones where it's like they just hatch and they don't walk, or they just kind of crawl around here and there. And then once you get them like more stuff, they start walking and everything else and flying. So it's a really neat game. That was a big aspect of that game that kept you wanting to come back and play more of it.
Yeah, and I remember the first time I played through it, and at the end, whenever you go supersonic and it's like you're golden, it's like, oh man, that was like, another. Obviously, it took a little bit from Dragon Ball Z when it came to the whole Super Saiyan thing, but it still was awesome. It was like, yeah, like let's do this. Like this is so cool.
Yeah.
So you and Shadow, whenever you go Super Saiyan or Super Sonic, I should say, not Saiyan, and you defeat Doctor Robotnik, like that was so much fun on that game too. And even with the chows, you could make a chow that you were really really nice to, and it made like this doorway. It was, I guess, it's supposed to resemble like a heaven type of scenario, like Stairway to Heaven. And then if you were like mean to the chow, you could like create this stairway that went down, and it was kind of like dark and dingy, like something else. So it was almost like you could get more than one Chow, and there was one you were always like, "Hey, buddy, hey there, buddy," and you were really nice to, and then the other one you're just like, "Throw it across!" Like we're gonna like we have to unlock this, like, and you just had to like treat this Chow like garbage because you had to unlock it. So
Like throwing them against
unfortunately,
the trees and stuff, throwing them out of trees and like pushing them into the water and all this stuff is
yeah,
terrible.
you put them in the water and they'd like be like drowning, and you're just like sitting there watching them, like, I need to do this. like, like it was like a horrible thing they made you do to unlock this. Like you had to treat them like garbage. You couldn't feed them. If you fed them, then like it was like, oh, they get happy again. You're like, I have to stop feeding you. Like I have to stop.
It was crazy.
um, Another thing I want to mention too, just some honorable mentions. Spider-Man 2, the movie video game. The Spider-Man 2, the movie video game. Yes. That one was probably one of my favorite superhero games on the GameCube or the Xbox. I guess it was on Xbox too, because it kind of really was a foreshadowing of the current Spider-Man games. In that one, you were in New York, you could just web around, and crime would happen, and you'd stop and you'd help rescue this person, that person. There was other racing things you could do as far as like you deliver a pizza, you had to deliver it so fast because that's what happens in the movie. And then there was also too like the main game, obviously, that you had to play through the movie. But it was really just a fun game to goof around on. You could web up people and go on top of the Empire State Building and then drop them. As a kid, this is stuff you did.
Just to see what would happen. Yeah. You had to
Yeah,
try.
yeah, yeah. And so now the new ones, it's kind of the same thing. Obviously, better graphics, and there's more of a wide range of area you can go to. It didn't restrict you like this Spider-Man game did. But it definitely was really, really fun. So now whenever I've played the new Spider-Man games, I'm like, hey, this is like Spider-Man 2, the old ones. And I went back and played this one recently, and the graphics, I tell you, they are just so funny compared to the new one. Like they look so bad. The cube face and everything that everyone has, it's awful in an awesome way. Um, Also too, Soul Calibur 2. I don't know if you remember whenever that came out, and it had for GameCube, it had Zelda. I think for Xbox, it had Yoda, and
I
then
think so.
for PS2, it was Spawn or something like that. It was,
Yeah, something
but
like
that was
that.
a great idea on their part. Made you want to buy all three of them, so you had that extra character.
Yeah.
That was cool. And one other thing too, I thought was great with the GameCube was the beat 'em ups. There was a lot of beat 'em ups on this system that we played. X-Men Legends 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That was fun. You got to be, one of the X-Men, and you could do it with 3 or 4 people. Did you ever get a chance to play that?
Briefly, yeah, I got to play it a little bit. X-Men Legends. Yeah, that was really fun. Um, I remember, I think, being Iceman a lot. I think in that one. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but yeah, it was a fun
Yeah.
game. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they had a game on there that was really good. Again, another beat 'em up, a 3D version of it. So it definitely gave you a different take, especially if you played the old Turtles games or old beat 'em ups like Final Fight, stuff like that. This is just another version of that, but in 3D, so it was cool. And then one that we're going to have to talk about further was Batman Rise of Sensu. This one is not a popular game. It's not a
No.
popular game. It's one of the only good Batman games at the time because the Batman games that were coming out at this time were hot garbage. They were not very good. But this one was actually really, really fun. You could beat it in like 5 hours. And it was just a beat 'em up that uh, was just unique and cool at the time. I mean, what do you remember from it?
Yeah. Again, beat 'em up where you could play co-op. You could be different characters. Um, you can gain different abilities with your different batarangs, that sort of thing. But each character had kind of some unique styles of fighting. Being Robin, being Nightwing, stuff like that. So it was custom like that a little bit, but like going around and just having fun, breaking boxes, and stuff like that, swinging on your bat ring and just swinging through people and hitting them all at once. It's a big beat 'em up. I've always liked beat 'em ups. I always like that. I'm kind of a fan of those for sure. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle ones was also the same way. I'm a big Leonardo fan, so I'd always play that. I think I was Nightwing most of the time in the Batman Rise of Sin Tzu. I think he was an available character. And I love that game. And like you said, Batman games were not very popular back then, just because they weren't that great. But this one was fun, where you could just pretend to be Batman, or be whoever, and actually have fun with it, and just be like, I am the most OP martial artist Batman of all time, and nothing can beat me.
Yeah.
That was a fun, and it had a neat storyline too. It wasn't too bad. Where you could play it, like you said, in like 5 hours. It was a great beat 'em up game though, to just hang out with friends and just cruise through it, and something more easier but also still fun. So I liked it.
Yeah.
What do you remember
Yeah,
from
and
it?
Kevin Conroy he did the voice for Batman, so always a plus. And they based this one, the art style more of the cartoons out at the time, so you could really relate. Watching the cartoons and then going and playing this game, it was like, one for one. A lot of things in this was just exactly like the cartoon. Um, Two with this one, whenever I bought this, it was cheap because no one was buying the game. But it came in a box set at GameStop, and it had a tube with a poster in it, and the poster was like black and white, kind of like smudgy black and white, and it was a neat little poster. I didn't think much about it. Eventually I got rid of this game. It's one of those games I got rid of that I shouldn't have gotten rid of. And now, if you look on eBay and stuff for this game with that poster in that box, like it is like $300 or more. Like people are just like dying for that. And I'm like, man, I bought that for super cheap at GameStop. I was a kid. I didn't think nothing of it. Like I like the game. And what was cool about this game too is that it actually had its own chapter book uh that they made like based off of this video game. So it's like I read the book and I played the video game and I had this poster thing. Like they really tried to promote this game like a lot, but it still didn't do very well as far as what I can tell. Like people were like with it, like they weren't too excited. They said it kind of got repetitive, and I'm like, well, that's a beat 'em up. Like it kind of gets repetitive. Like you just
Yeah,
you're doing the same thing almost every level. You just beat up people that come at you in different angles. That's
pretty
all
much.
it is.
Mhm.
um, but I have a lot of. I think I still have the book for this Rise of Sensu. He just was a new enemy for Batman, and so he gets together, Clayface and Scarecrow and some others to come together to try and take over Gotham. Um, the Joker's not in this one, I don't think, so automatically half the people are not interested in it because Joker's like the main villain all the time. But all in all, it was a fun game. It's a great game if you have an afternoon and you have some friends over and you're like, hey, let's just play something together. You can, again, beat it in like 5 hours. So sit there, have a couple drinks, and, just play some games, which we should do that here soon. We should definitely do that here soon. Like, I have the GameCube and this game. We should just like sit down and
Yes,
play through Rise of Sensu.
yes,
I have old CTR TVs too. We could play it like old school, man.
and back when the glare was strong on TVs.
Yes. Yes, yes.
Oh
Um,
man,
but as far as the GameCube goes, it really didn't do very well. This is one of the ones that was just not a system that did well. We talked about some of the points why it didn't do well, but it did well in our hearts because we loved the GameCube, loved the Xbox. PlayStation 2 can kick rocks, but no, I'm kidding.
they made a
Nobody quote
comeback.
me on that. Yes.
Nobody
Yes.
quote us on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, yeah. But those were just some memories that we had as far as this generation of consoles. Obviously, there also was the Dreamcast around this time too, but none of us really had one of those at that time. We also had handhelds that we're going to talk about too on an episode. Just different ones that we had. Obviously, Nintendo takes off during this time with their Game Boy Advance, their Game Boy Advance SP. We had that we could talk about too. But we're already about an hour and 47 minutes in, so we're just going to save that for another time. But we are going to be coming out with another episode here soon, talking about the next generation of consoles and some of the stuff we liked about that, as well as some of the games that we did enjoy on those systems, and maybe just some different takes on our nostalgia and what we remembered and what we thought was great and what we thought was terrible. Was there anything else that you wanted to make sure we highlighted, Captain Q?
Just that we appreciate you guys again for listening. We love doing this, and we want to make this more available to you guys as well. If you guys have any thoughts, comments, some recommendations that we can talk about, something that you guys enjoy, obviously put it in the comments. Let us know. Reach out to us. We are more than willing to talk about anything you guys enjoy, and see what we can come up with further along on this podcast. But again, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Yes, and if you're listening to us on YouTube, don't forget to check us out on Spotify. Check us out on YouTube. We're here, there, and everywhere. Also, too, we should be coming out with shows more periodically. We're trying to get that nailed down here, too. Thank you again for watching, and until you see you next time, carry on. See ya.
Two gingers talking about arcades, you know it. Nerd culture glowing. From video games to comic books, they show it. Why do people get boring? They adore it. Their beards grow longer, but they still hold on. Level up, the mics are hot. They're rolling, pixels and panels, the story's unfolding. In a world of quests and heroes, they're holding the flag of nerd pride. They're the voices of the chosen.